imagine building this massive chain link fence around like a 50-year-old mountain of trash to save lives, right? But then you accidentally create an overnight hunger crisis in the process.
Right.
Or picture a government that desperately needs gold to save its entire economy, but the miners literally can't dig it up because they can't afford the fuel to run their pumps.
Yeah, it's a huge paradox.
It really is. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. We're coming to you straight from our own newsroom here at Addis Fortune, which, if you don't know, is Ethiopia's largest English weekly newspaper.
Exactly.
And we've got a giant stack of our most recent reporting right in front of us. Today's mission is to basically guide you through the most crucial interconnected stories from this week's edition.
And, you know, it is a really profound week to be looking at the news. We're going to walk you through some of these massive structural transitions happening in Ethiopia right now. We are looking at heavily contested political elections, a really tense macroeconomic showdown with the IMF, and, well, the heavy human toll that comes with trying to force this informal shadow economy into the formal light.
Yeah. But before we open the pages of our newspaper, we really need to establish some ground rules.
Always a good idea.
Right. Because as journalists here at Addis Fortune, we cover highly sensitive, politically charged topics, you know?
Yeah.
Things involving election disputes, government policy, all of that.
Yeah, the heavy stuff.
Exactly. So we want to state right up front for you, the listener, we are strictly impartial. We take absolutely no sides here. No left-wing alignment. No right-wing alignment.
No political agenda whatsoever.
Nothing. Our sole job today is to report the facts, the quotes, and the underlying logic exactly as they're presented in the reporting.
Right. Our goal is simply to help you understand the mechanics behind the news. You know, we want to break down how these massive policies actually work rather than, like, telling you how you should feel about them.
So let's get into those mechanics. And I think we really have to start with the political landscape, right? And this battle over national data.
Yeah, you have to start there.
Because you cannot run a country without knowing who lives in it. And right now, the recent national elections have moved from the counting phase straight into intense contestation.
Very intense.
Melitwork Hailu, the chief of the National Election Board, recently disclosed that they are staring down 47 official complaints.
And these are not just, you know, minor procedural gripes from fringe groups. We're seeing major structural pushback from over 24 political parties.
Wow.
Yeah. For instance, Izima, which is a significant opposition party that advocates for broad democratic and economic reforms, they are demanding entirely fresh elections in 5 specific constituencies.
5 of them?
Yeah, 5. Because they allege that local administrators were basically hovering around polling stations, acting as election coordinators, and aggressively pressuring citizens to vote for the incumbent Prosperity Party.
And the friction isn't just happening at the ballot boxes either. It's happening during the registration phase, which is wild.
Right.
Take the Kucha People's Democratic Party, or KPDP. Their president, James Gadebu, is literally a sitting member of parliament.
Right, a sitting MP.
And he told our reporters that he, along with nearly 500 of his party members, were physically blocked by anti-riot forces from even registering to vote.
Yeah.
Just because they were wearing their party symbols.
It's incredible. Now, the election board chair did note that while 73% of constituencies are finalized, the highly contested areas with lots of candidates, places like Addis Ababa, those are delayed.
Yeah.
But all of this political tension, all this arguing over who won which district, it all points to a much deeper, more systemic issue.
Right. And this is the part that I find so structurally fascinating because all of this is happening in an absolute statistical vacuum.
It really is.
Like Ethiopia hasn't had a national census since 2007.
Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. I mean, okay, let's unpack this. It's like trying to build a house when the architects are actively fighting over who won the bid, right? And you don't even know the dimensions of the foundation because you haven't measured it since 2007.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Like, how can a country effectively hold an election or plan reforms without knowing exactly how many people live there?
Well, you don't, at least not with any real precision. And the government definitely recognizes this data vacuum. But their proposed solution is generating its own controversy right now.
Yeah, the new bill.
Right. They're pushing a new bill to centralize all national data collection under a newly created Ethiopian Statistical Board.
Which, I mean, that sounds practical on paper until you look at the fine print.
Exactly.
Because the board members and the director would be appointed directly by the prime minister.
Yep.
If you're trying to establish unquestionable neutral facts, Having the executive branch handpick the people who count the numbers seems like, well, a massive conflict of interest.
And this raises an important question, right?
Right.
Because that is the exact argument made by critics like Samuel Hailu from the Ethiopian Statistical Association.
Right.
He argues that a statistical authority needs to be completely insulated from political influence. It should answer to lawmakers in parliament, not the executive branch.
That makes sense.
But the government's rationale is that right now, various regional authorities and institutions are producing entirely conflicting figures. They argue that a centralized board is the only way to stop institutional contradictions and create a single, unified set of national data.
But see, if you don't have credible, universally accepted demographic data, you don't really know your own tax base.
Exactly.
And if you don't know your tax base and your economic foundation, it completely paralyzes your ability to negotiate your massive national debt.
Yes.
Because international lenders don't deal in estimates, they demand to see the math. Which brings us directly to the global financial stage.
The macro picture.
Right. Ethiopia is currently walking an incredibly precarious macroeconomic tightrope.
The stakes here really cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
In late 2023, Ethiopia defaulted on a $1 billion Eurobond.
Ouch.
Yeah. And for those unfamiliar, a Eurobond is essentially a way for a country to borrow money in a foreign currency, usually US dollars, from international private investors.
Right.
So, because Ethiopia defaulted, international creditors have recently rejected a restructuring proposal and are actively threatening to file a massive lawsuit in a UK court.
And a lawsuit like that would be devastating because Ethiopia is simultaneously trying to negotiate a critical lifeline from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF.
Right.
We're talking about a $3.4 billion extended credit facility, which is basically a long-term lending program designed to help countries struggling to balance their books.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah, and there's $468 million waiting to be unlocked very soon.
Yeah.
But the IMF doesn't just hand over billions of dollars out of goodwill. They demand structural reforms.
They demand long-term debt sustainability. And one of the biggest, most painful conditions the IMF is demanding before they unlock these funds is the complete removal of fuel subsidies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The government currently spends massive amounts of money artificially lowering the cost of gas for its citizens.
Right.
The plan is to eliminate those subsidies, take the roughly 200 billion birr they save, and reallocate it to a productive safety net program aimed at protecting the poorest citizens.
Wait, hold on. I really need to pause here because the logic seems completely inverted.
How so?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Fuel is the baseline input for literally everything.
Sure.
If the price of fuel skyrockets, the price of transporting food jumps, manufacturing costs jump, and just basic survival gets vastly more expensive.
Right.
So if the goal is to stabilize the country, how does intentionally jacking up the price of gas for everyday people accomplish that? The IMF wants to remove fuel subsidies to save the macro economy, but won't that just immediately crush the very people they are trying to protect with safety nets? It feels a bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul, like trying to fix a leak in a boat by tearing off pieces of the hull to patch the sail. You might catch a little wind, but the people at the bottom are instantly drowning in inflation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a brutal economic trade-off. It really comes down to how the IMF views long-term versus short-term economic health.
Okay.
Julie Kozak, who is the IMF's communications director, she argues that subsidizing fuel is she calls it a distortionary policy.
Meaning it warps the market.
Exactly. It burns through the government's limited resources to maintain a fake market price. The IMF believes that removing these subsidies is the necessary foundation for sustained growth, forcing the market to operate on reality, provided you have those safety nets in place.
But local economic experts reading our reporting are deeply skeptical of that reality. I mean, if you're listening to this and wondering how the average person is supposed to survive this transition, you're hitting on the exact crisis that experts like investment advisor Murd are warning about.
Yes, Murd's analysis is crucial here.
Because the government isn't just removing subsidies, right? They are simultaneously trying to capture more domestic revenue through aggressive taxation.
Right. To understand Murd's warning, you really have to look at the numbers. Because foreign credit has largely dried up following that Eurobond default, the state is basically backed into a corner.
Yeah.
They desperately need domestic revenue to keep the government functioning. So they squeeze the formal workforce. Mirrored highlights this staggering comparison. In Ethiopia, a salary of roughly $95 a month is taxed at a 35% rate.
Wait, let's just sit with that for a second. If you make $95 a month, the government takes 35% of it.
Yes. Now compare that to neighboring Kenya, which has a roughly similar GDP.
Okay.
In Kenya, that 35% tax bracket doesn't kick in until you are making about $6,200 a month.
That is, taxing a $95 income like it is a $6,000 income is staggering.
It is.
Merritt calls it extortionist, and the underlying mechanics explain why. He's warning that if you squeeze fixed income earners that hard, while simultaneously taking away their cheap fuel, you aren't building a resilient formal economy.
No, you're not.
You're just forcing businesses to shut down their formal operations and move entirely into the untaxed, unregulated shadow economy just to survive.
Exactly. And Murd also criticizes the underlying mechanisms of how the government is managing its debt. He points to the lack of a healthy yield curve.
Oh, let's define that, because yield curve is one of those academic terms that sounds super intimidating but describes something very practical.
Yeah, definitely. Think of a yield curve as a roadmap for an economy's future. Normally, a healthy government issues long-term bonds. They say, lend us money for 10 years and we'll guarantee you a 17 to 19% return.
Okay, so a locked-in rate.
Right. That 10-year commitment sets a stable baseline. It tells businesses, banks, and foreign investors what long-term money costs so they can plan. But Ethiopia isn't doing that.
Because investors are hesitant to lock their money up for 10 years in such an unpredictable market.
Precisely. So instead, the government relies on issuing short-term 29-day or 6-month treasury bills at fixed rates around 16%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're borrowing money for less than a month at a time, mostly relying on domestic sources like pension funds.
So it's basically the national equivalent of putting your massive mortgage payment on a monthly credit card.
Yep.
You're just frantically spinning funds from one account to another to make the next payment, which completely destroys that long-term economic roadmap.
And without a reliable yield curve, banks can't lend confidently, businesses cannot forecast their growth, and you remain trapped in this cycle of short-term survival.
Right. So the government is backed into a corner. They need foreign currency to pay off their international debts and satisfy the IMF. But their domestic taxation is crushing the formal workforce. So how does a country actually generate the hard foreign currency it needs to break this cycle? Which brings us to Ethiopia's most critical foreign exchange lifeline, and honestly, arguably the most fascinating paradox in this week's edition of Addis Fortune.
The gold mining sector.
The gold mining sector.
Yeah, gold is a massive economic driver. Recent exports brought in $2.56 billion.
Billion with a B.
With a B. But Ethiopian gold isn't primarily extracted by giant multinational corporations with heavy industrial machinery. The supply chain is heavily reliant on an estimated 1.5 million artisanal and small-scale miners.
Wow, 1.5 million people.
Yeah. These individuals make up about 74% of the entire mining workforce.
Okay, let's walk through how this actually works on the ground, because it illustrates the gap between macroeconomic policy and microeconomic reality so perfectly.
It really does.
Historically, a lot of this gold was smuggled out of the country because the black market paid better rates than the government. To fix this, the central bank implemented what was genuinely a smart policy. They started offering premium prices, actually paying these artisanal miners more than the global market rate just to ensure the gold flowed into the formal taxable banking system.
And initially, the policy was a massive success.
Yeah.
Licensed traders like Zenabi Girja reported that illegal trading plummeted. The central bank managed to purchase 39 tons of gold.
That's incredible.
The informal miners were happily participating in the formal economy because, the incentives were aligned.
Right. But then the system broke down because right now production has absolutely plummeted.
Yeah.
In critical mining hubs like the Benishangul Gumuz region, production is down by as much as 50%.
Half.
And it has nothing to do with geology. The gold is still in the ground. The miners still want to work. The problem is a crippling shortage of fuel.
What's fascinating here is how fragile the supply chain really is. Artisanal mining is backbreaking work, sure, but it still requires machinery. You need sediment pumps, you need basic excavators, you need generators.
And all of that runs on gas.
Exactly. Without fuel, the entire operation just grinds to a halt. The official supply of fuel has essentially vanished in these regions, and as a result, the price of fuel in the black market has skyrocketed from the official rate of around 180 birr a liter to as much as 1,000 birr.
So what does this all mean? We have this grand, tragic irony. The government desperately needs gold to get the foreign currency required to stabilize the economy, right? But the miners can't dig up the gold because the country doesn't have the foreign currency to provide them with affordable fuel. We are literally running out of gas to power our own gold rush.
It's crazy, and the downstream effects are devastating. An entrepreneur named Antina Addisu in Gambella told our reporters that his daily food expenses for his idle workforce were exceeding 150,000 birr.
Just to feed people who can't work.
Yeah. He couldn't afford the black market fuel to run his equipment, so he had to completely suspend excavation and send his former workforce home.
Which just triggers a devastating chain reaction for the workers themselves. Take the story of Habib Mohammed, who's a miner featured in our reporting. Habib had achieved exactly what the government wants. He had a formal job with a licensed company, earning a guaranteed, stable salary.
Dream.
Right. But when the fuel crisis forced his company to shut down, Habib didn't just wait around, he needs to eat. So he was forced right back into the unregulated black market. He joined a production sharing group deep in the remote belts where informal buyers give them terrible prices.
The policy successfully lured miners into the light with premium pricing, but the logistical failure to provide a basic input like fuel is actively pushing them right back into shadows.
Yeah.
And Dr. John C. Bain, who is an economics professor and a member of the Monetary Policy Committee, he pointed out a really critical distinction here. If fuel is widely available on the black market at 1,000 birr a liter, but licensed traders can't find it, then this isn't strictly a supply shortage.
What is it then?
It is diversion. It is systemic, weak oversight, allowing informal networks to capture the resources.
The formal economy is absorbing all the friction and failure, while the shadow economy captures all the profit.
Exactly.
And this recurring theme, this often violent friction that occurs when you try to force an informal system into a formalized structure before it's ready, it brings us to our final and honestly most devastatingly human story.
Yeah, this one is tough.
We're leaving the remote gold belts and going right into the capital city of Addis Ababa to a landfill called Kosha.
Kosha is a massive site that has served as the city's primary dumping ground for over 50 years. But it isn't just a trash heap, it is a complex informal ecosystem.
Yeah.
Between 140,000 and 150,000 people live in and around this site. For generations, thousands of people have survived by scavenging materials, basically creating a massive, unregulated recycling chain.
Right, but recently the city administration made a drastic move to formalize and control the area. They began physically securing the perimeter, like building high wire fences and setting up strict police checkpoints to stop illegal dumping and control who goes in and out.
And to understand the city's urgency, you do have to understand the history. In March 2017, there was a catastrophic landslide at Kosh.
Yeah, it was awful.
Mountains of garbage collapsed, killing over 116 people. The deputy mayor, Wanda Musetta, argues that defining the perimeter and restricting access is a non-negotiable first step to protecting the public and preventing another tragedy.
And for some residents, the government intervention has worked. We reported on a man named Barakat Ashalu who used to live right on the edge of the danger zone.
Right.
He exchanged his title deed for a formal resettlement plot elsewhere in the city. And he expressed, profound relief at being relocated away from the hazards.
Sure.
But Barakat is the exception. For the vast majority of the shadow workforce that depends on Kosha, the new chain link fence is an absolute catastrophe.
Because for people living on the extreme margins of society, Kosha is their labor market. When you abruptly fence it off, you don't just solve a safety hazard, you sever their only lifeline. Look at the story of Taijas Dabasu. She's a 47-year-old single mother. 9 years ago, her husband actually died in a scavenging accident inside the landfill.
Which is an unimaginable tragedy. You would think she would want nothing to do with the site after that.
You would think so, but economic reality leaves no room for trauma. To pay her 4,500 birr monthly rent and keep her family fed, she had to pull her 2 sons out of school so they could help her forage in that exact same dangerous environment.
Unbelievable.
And when the police suddenly cut off access to the landfill, her entire livelihood vanished overnight. She told Addis Fortune, literally through tears, that without access to the site, she has no idea how her family will survive.
We also shared the story of a 19-year-old named Solomon Ababi. He's been scavenging at Kosh since he was 14. He and his friends share a small shack, and they are now completely locked out of their income. Neighbors are already reporting that people who depended on daily picking are going hungry. It's as if the city built a wall to solve a valid safety problem. but accidentally created an immediate hunger crisis overnight.
Ephraim A. Tesfahunen, an urban specialist we spoke to, framed it perfectly. He said that fences are blunt instruments. You cannot achieve genuine environmental rehabilitation or modernization simply by locking out the vulnerable community that depends on that ecosystem.
And what makes it so frustrating is that the community was actively trying to formalize themselves.
Yes.
Like, we reported on a woman named Hannah Adain. She has lived beside Kosh her entire 30-year life. She saw this crackdown coming, so she proactively organized 9 of her neighbors into a cooperative union.
They did everything right.
They went through the bureaucracy, got all their paperwork ready for a trade license, and planned to start a legal compost manufacturing enterprise. They wanted to officially process the city's bio-waste and be part of the modern solution.
And their reward for trying to join the formal economy: bureaucratic silence. Their application is just stalled, and they are sitting there waiting while the wire fences go up around them. Ephraim argues that instead of tossing out this informal workforce, the city should harness them, provide micro startup capital, grant them those licenses, and create dedicated safe processing spaces outside the danger zones.
I mean, why lock out an incredibly eager workforce like Hannah's union that literally has all their paperwork ready? Why not use this labor force that already exists instead of just locking them out to starve?
Because bureaucratic systems often prioritize the immediate appearance of order over the messy reality of a transition. When you zoom out and look at all the stories we've discussed from this week's Addis Fortune, a very stark pattern emerges. Ethiopia is making a rapid, aggressive push for modernization and formalization across the board.
We see it everywhere. We see it in the macroeconomic demands of the IMF trying to end fuel subsidies. We see it in the central bank trying to pull gold miners into the formal banking sector. And we see it in the physical fencing of Koshi to control waste management.
But in every single instance, the transition is fundamentally jarring. The vulnerable shadow workforce, whether it is the fixed income earner crushed by a 35% tax bracket, or the artisanal gold miner paralyzed by a lack of fuel, or the scavenger locked out of a landfill, they are all left entirely stranded before the new, modern system is actually built and ready to support them.
It really is a profound, agonizing, growing pain for a nation in flux. By flipping through the pages of our reporting with you today, we've witnessed a country grappling with massive, interconnected challenges.
Very interconnected.
We saw how a statistical vacuum paralyzes both elections and international debt negotiations. We looked at how the IMF's macroeconomic theories collide with the reality of surviving on $95 a month. We saw gold miners driven back into the black market by logistical failures, and we saw scavengers locked behind a wire fence.
It serves as a vital reminder that economic policies are never just abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. Every missing census data point, every diverted liter of fuel, and every new chain link fence ripples downward to alter human lives.
Which leaves me with one final thought, something for you to mull over after you finish listening today. We talk a lot about the necessity of modernizing an economy. But if the informal economy, the shadow networks that have literally sustained millions of Ethiopians for generations, if that is systematically dismantled before the formal economy is strong enough to absorb those workers, what happens next?
That's the real issue.
Could this rocky modernization transition period spark an entirely new kind of social crisis that no international loan can possibly fix? How does a country safely step into the bright light of the future without completely abandoning the people who built their lives in its shadows?
That is truly the defining question for the years ahead.
It is. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through our newsroom's weekly reporting. Keep reading Addis Fortune, keep asking the hard questions about how things actually work, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.